Hello and welcome, and thank you for joining us for another installment of NYSAC's News Update. This is day 2 of the Governor's State of the State Address, and we're joining you again after yesterday's briefing to report on what the Governor discussed today. And really, the theme, Dave, focused on reinventing and reopening in the wake of COVID. The Governor highlighted a couple areas of interest here. I'm just going to go through them quick, and then I'll turn it over to you to see if you want to opine on this in further detail. But the Governor talked about reopening smartly, and specifically, how do we as a state engage and work on rapid testing expansion and really using that as a gateway to opening up some of these other economies that have been shuttered during this economic hardship period due to COVID. He talked about restoring arts and getting people back into our venues, getting people back into enjoying life, essentially. He talked about the remote economy and the need for high-speed internet for everyone, and really expanding broadband availability and, more importantly, in the Governor's words, affordability. The Governor touched on the homelessness and housing crisis. And this was something that we mentioned yesterday on the video, but the Governor talked a little bit more detail on his plans for this. And then, of course, the Governor touched on a commission on the future of the New York economy. He's going to be launching this new commission to identify new opportunities to get New Yorkers back to work. And then the Jobs of the Future program, which includes a Pathways Pledge, which is a workforce development initiative, and the expansion of SUNY's online training system. So with that, Dave, the Governor, it was a really brief speech today, about 20-25 minutes. We know that it has been reported in the press that he will be talking about investing in our green economy tomorrow. So that video tomorrow will likely highlight green initiatives that the Governor talks about. And then on Thursday, the Governor is planning on speaking about a public sector redevelopment plan and making significant infrastructure investments in the public sector. Again, this is all being reported by the press here in Albany. But at this time, Dave, I want to turn it over to you to see if you had any initial reaction, and we'll go from there.
Sure. Thank you, Ryan. The Governor was again in the war room. And he continued with that theme of the battle we're in with COVID, and how the economy doesn't grow during war, in wartime, and the time for rebuilding is afterwards. He stuck with the theme of the battle, talked about reconstruction and how we're going to build back better. And these are really important things. Parts of the state have really been impacted much more harshly by the pandemic, and the social distancing and the density restrictions that have been necessary to slow the spread and to help not overwhelm the hospital systems. Then we're all in trouble. So these are really interesting things. He wants to expand rapid testing, and it sounded like, again, we'll see how these are all written into statute or regulation and how it's going to work exactly. But the idea of expanding rapid testing, he gave the example of the Buffalo Bills game this weekend, which seemed to be a success. 7,000 people went to the game. They were all tested before the game, before they could get into the stadium. And he wants to use that model to open up any number of other types of entertainment venues or the office buildings, especially in New York City. I mean, New York City's really been hit very hard by this. They rely a lot on the culture and the arts and Broadway and restaurants and the people coming into the city that work there and have a lunch and things like that. That's not happening. The vacancy rate in the buildings downtown is enormously high from a standpoint of the workforce just working remotely and not coming into the city. He wants to use rapid testing, and he wants to partner with building owners to do the rapid testing on a regular basis so we can increase that density in the building safely. Very important for the economy down there, and really any part of the state that is struggling with a commuter workforce that hasn't been commuting into the region. In the Capital District, Albany County is further behind in sales tax for a similar reason. The workforce is not coming in to the community like it was before COVID. So these are all important things to do. And then again, the workforce, the people that work in those industries, this is a really important. He kind of talked about how artists, like almost half of them are still unemployed as of September. So like a 6-month hiatus from employment and the ability to earn income to raise a family and support themselves.
Well,
These
Dave,
are all things that are very important.
yeah, you bring up some interesting points there, and really something that I'm thinking about is how the governor really focused today on helping New York City in particular, in the downstate region, which was hit so hard by COVID in March and April this spring, really getting that section of New York State to rebound. Of course, he highlighted some other initiatives like the broadband expansion, which will apply for the rest of New York, but he really touched on some of these new initiatives that he wants to launch to get people back into our cities, getting them back into our arts and entertainment venues. You just talked about artist unemployment rates. Certainly, New York City has been faced with a severe economic impact because of COVID. Speaking of which, Dave, how much, I'm just curious, how much has New York City lost year to date on sales tax? I know that's a primary driver of their economy.
Yeah, it's interesting that today he talked about this as part of his state of the state, his multiple venue state of the state. Today was the final day of sales tax settlements from the state to the counties for all of 2020. So the last payment arrived today in bank accounts for the counties of New York City. And New York City's sales tax is down 19% for all of 2020 compared to all of 2019. And in reality, if you look at the year, if you just looked at the COVID months, they're probably off somewhere in the low 20%, 22, 23%, because January and February of 2020 were great months for just about every county in the state and the city from sales tax. It was very strong. You know, that 19% that translates to about $1.7 billion for short, just in sales tax, just in that revenue stream. When you think about all the jobs linked to those industries, the payroll tax is an income tax that the city collects was not there. So it has a big impact. The one other thing, you talked about revitalizing the cores of cities, and we potentially have excess office space and commercial space because we don't really know for sure if 100% of all these employees are going to come back 5 days a week in these urban centers, or will it be 4 days a week or 3 days a week or some mixture. We've heard stories anecdotally across the country. Some very large corporations had built brand new headquarters and they're going to sell them to somebody else before they even move into them. That didn't necessarily happen in New York, but we've heard it from the big banks downstate, and we've heard it from the big tech companies where they're just going to let people work from home until June or July of 2021, and then reassess at that time. So this is a pretty important, how much excess office space or commercial spaces are going to be in these urban centers, and can it be converted to another purpose? The governor, as he talked about, was talking about homelessness, affordable housing, supportive housing for people trying to get back into permanent housing. Again, as we talked about yesterday, the devil's going to be in the details. How do you incentivize developers to build this kind of space versus something that could probably potentially be more profitable for them, to build more higher end condos with retail space at the bottom? That's typically where developers want to go, not just in New York City, but everywhere, wherever they can make the most profit.
Certainly, I think the governor hit several different categories today, which counties may have an opportunity to engage the state and interact on. Certainly, he talked about creating a New York arts revival, which will include this statewide campaign to really get performing arts, and not only performing arts, but all types of arts, visual arts, out into the public. And there'll be an opportunity for counties with their tourism directors and their tourism promotion agencies to work together with the state to really get that going. And as you just talked about, Dave, all of these initiatives the governor outlined today they all have a common purpose, which is to get New York's economy back on track and incentivize, kickstart, if you will, the economy back into motion again. So certainly that helps counties with sales tax, as you just talked about. New York City facing, a 19.7%, roughly a 20% decline in sales tax revenue. We'll have to look to see what the governor is going to talk about tomorrow with the green economy. I think there will be more opportunities for counties to partner with him on his initiatives there. So everyone on who's listening to today's video, stay tuned for tomorrow. We're going to be talking about the green economy and how the governor plans to make investments there. And then on Thursday, we'll be looking to hear about what kind of investments should be made with public infrastructure. So again, thank you, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, and we look forward to speaking with you all tomorrow.
Thank you, Ryan. See you tomorrow.